Now we want to talk about factoring trinomials when the leading coefficient is not 1. That basically means that instead of having a problem like x squared minus 2x plus 1 where the leading coefficient is 1, we're going to start to see problems like this, where the leading coefficient is not 1, okay? And that basically means that your answer has a lot more possibilities. That's why we're going to take a different route of steps in order to factor these kinds of problems. When the leading coefficient is not 1, there are some different steps we should take to factor in all polynomials. In all, what we're going to do is rewrite the polynomial with 4 terms so that we may factor by grouping. Now, there are some steps that we need to do in order to factor by grouping. So, here are the steps. I'll read them to you. Steps to factoring when the leading coefficient is not 1. First, you want to multiply the coefficient of the first term with the third term's constant. Secondly, you want to list the factors of that product found in step 1. Thirdly, you want to choose the combination of factors whose sum or difference gives you the middle term. Fourthly, we're going to rewrite the polynomial using the factors that you chose in steps 2 and 3 instead of the middle term that's in the original problem. After you do all that, then you continue to factor by grouping. So, those steps with this problem. Okay, the first step says to multiply the coefficient of the first term with the constant, with the third term's constant. So 2 times 12 gives me 24. That's the first step. The second step says to list the factors of whatever number you found in step 1. So the number 24 has factors of 6 and 4, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 1 and 24. Step 3 says that we should choose the combination of factors that's going to give us the middle term of negative 5x. So here, 6 and 4, that can only give us 10 or 2. 2 and 12 can give us 10 or 14. 3 and 8 can give us 5 or 11. 5 or 11, our middle term is 5, so we're going to choose the combination of 3 and 8. Now step 4 says to rewrite the polynomial with 4 terms instead of 3 with these new numbers. So that means we're not going to change the problem, but we're going to represent the term negative 5x with 3x and 8x. So I'm going to rewrite. Here's my 2x squared. I'm just bringing that down. And here's minus 12. I'm also bringing that down. Now, like I said, I want to write negative 5x, but instead using 2 terms. How can I represent negative 5x with 3x and 8x? Obviously, if the middle term is negative, that means I want my larger term here to also be negative. So I'm going to use a negative 8x. And since my answer is going to be negative 5x, the only way to get negative 5x out of negative 8x is by adding a positive 3x. Now I can see that negative 8x and positive 3x will still give me where I started my negative 5x. That's how I know I'm headed in the right direction. Because now that I'm done with step 4 and I rewrote my polynomial with 4 terms, now what you can do is factor by grouping. 2x squared minus 8x. What are the common factors here? The common factors here are 2x. So after I divide out the 2x from both terms, what's left? 2x squared divided by 2x leaves me with an x, and negative 8x divided by 2x leaves me with negative 4. Let's look at the next one. 3x minus 12. Here, the common factor is a positive 3. So when I divide out that positive 3, let's see what's left. 3x divided by 3 leaves me with x, and negative 12 divided by 3 leaves me with negative 4. Now I can continue to factor by grouping by seeing what's the common factor here and here. They both have x minus 4. So I'm going to divide out the x minus 4 And you can see what's left is 2x plus 3. So I just factored that trinomial where the leading coefficient was not 1 by first following some steps in order to get it to have 4 terms so that I can factor by grouping like we did in the beginning of the learning module. Let's look at the next one. We have 6x squared plus x minus 1. Let's follow the steps that were given to us in the beginning. The first step says multiply the coefficient of the first term with the constant's last term. So 6 times 1 gives me 6. Step 2 says list the factors of that number found in step 1. Some factors of 6 would be 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Step 3 says choose the combination. Which one of these groups can give me the middle term 1x? Well, 1 and 6 aren't going to give me 1x, but 2 and 3 can. So step 4 says polynomial. I'm bringing down the 6x squared and a negative 1, but instead of using the middle term in the original problem, we're going to use the factors that we found. Now, obviously, 2 and 3, in order to get 1, we need to subtract those. And we also want our 1 to be positive, so that means 3 needs to be positive and 2 needs to be negative. So that when I combine these, positive 3x and negative 2x, you can see that it takes me back to the original. That's how I know I did it right. Once I've rewritten the polynomial with 4 terms, now I can continue to factor by grouping. In the first set, 6x squared plus 3x, they have the term 3x in common. After I divide 3x into both terms, I can see what's going to be left inside my parentheses. 6x squared divided by 3x leaves me with a 2x. And 3x divided by 3x leaves me with a positive 1. Now when I go to my second binomial set, I can see that negative 2x minus 1 is the same exact terms that's in this binomial but opposite signs. That gives me a hint that I should be factoring out a negative 1. So when I take out negative 1, what's left is negative 2x divided by negative 1 leaves me with a positive 2x, and negative 1 divided by negative 1 leaves me with a positive 1. Now I can see that these factors are the same. So now this becomes my GCF. My GCF here would be 2x because that's what both terms have, and what's left is going to give me 3x minus 1. I have a few more problems that we can try to work out. They're a little bit bigger. Here we have 6x squared minus 19x plus 10. And again, we want to follow the steps that we were given earlier. The first step says to multiply the first and the last terms. So 6 and 10 give me 60. Step 2 says list the factors of that number. So some factors of 60 will be 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 1 and 60, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, and 6 and 10. Now step 3 says to choose which combinations of these factors is going to give me negative 19x. Not 2 and 30. 3 and 20 could give me 17 or 20 work. 1 and 60 is not going to work. But 4 and 15, I can get to 19 with 4 and 15. So now that I've chosen the group that's going to work for me, the next step is to rewrite the polynomial with 4 terms so that I can factor by grouping. So I'm going to bring down the 6x squared. I'm going to bring down the positive 10. Now instead of using negative 19x, I'm going to use 4 and 15. Now since I need to make it a negative 19, that means both of these numbers are going to add them together. So here I'll get a minus 4x minus 15x plus 10. And you can see that minus 4x and the minus 15x take me right back to that middle term. Again, I know I've written it correctly. Once I have my 4 terms, now I can continue to factor by grouping. 6x squared and minus 4x, negative 15x and plus 10. In the first set, I can see that they have a 2x in common, which is going to leave me with a 3x minus 2. In the second set, I have a negative 5 in common, which is also going to leave me with a 3x minus 2. Here I can see that my common factor is 3x minus 2, so that's going to be my first factor, and what's left, 2x minus 5, is going to give me my second factor. Now let's try this one more time with one final problem. I have 8x squared minus 14x plus 5. Again, by that first and last term, 8 and 5, for the first step to get 40. The second step says to list the factors of that number, 2 and 20, 1 and 40, 4 and 10, and 5 and 8. Step 3 says to choose the combination that's going to give me the middle term of negative 14. Well, 2 and 20 is not going to give me 14, 1 and 40 is not, and neither is 5 and 8. But the combination of 4 and 10 will give me 14. The way to get, again, and the only way to get 14 is to add 4 and 10. That means 4 and 10 need to have the same signs. So let's bring down my 8x squared, bring down my positive 5, and let's rewrite negative 14x with using 4 and 10. So instead of using negative 14x, I'm going to use negative 4x minus 10x. And again, you can see that negative 4x and negative 10x take me back to the middle term. So I'm actually not changing the problem. I'm just changing the way it looks. So now that I have my 4 terms, I can factor by grouping. 8x squared minus 4x minus 10x plus 5. The common factor here in the 8x squared minus 4x would be 4x. So after I take out the 4x, what's left? 8x squared divided by 4x leaves me with 2x. Negative 4x divided by 4x leaves me with negative 1. In the second set, I see negative 10x plus 5. I can see that my common factor is going to be negative 5. When I take out the left, negative 10x divided by negative 5 is going to give me a 2x. And a 5 divided by negative 5 is going to give me a negative 1. So again, now I can see my common terms here are 2x minus 1. After I take out the 2x minus 1, what's left? 4x minus 5. So those are going to be the terms in my second binomial factor.